So debt, that is a big one.
It is.
What are the strategies to paying off debt?
Well, there's going to be a strategy for everyone, and I'm going to give you a couple of options. The procedure stays the same, but the reasoning is a little bit different for each of them. So the first one is called the snowball method, and that's where you're going to line up all of your debts from smallest balance to largest balance. You'll apply a minimum payment to all of your debts, and whatever you can afford to pay extra, you'll put onto your first debt. The second approach is called the avalanche method, and that's where you might, if you have a lot of debts around the same amount, you might line them up highest interest rate to lowest interest rate. And the last one I call lovingly the emo method, and that's where you line them up most emotionally charged to least emotionally charged.
How do you choose which is best? How do you go about using one of those strategies?
You sort of take a little bit of inventory about how you know you have success in the past. So if you know that you need a win as soon as possible, then go with the snowball method. That way you pay off that smaller debt first, and then you have a bigger payment to apply to the second debt. If you're motivated by saving money on interest, then go with the avalanche method, and you can sort of keep track of how much interest you're saving by approaching it that way.
So now that we have some strategies to pay off debt, I think that we have to talk about the different types of debt that there are, that people are carrying. What are they?
There's lots of categories of debt, but some of the main ones are secured debt and unsecured debt. So a secured debt is something that has an asset attached to it, and it typically has a lower interest rate. So that might be something like a mortgage for your house. An unsecured debt is something where you can, or it's not attached to anything, and it typically has a higher interest rate, and that would be something like a credit card. Within those categories, there's also installment debt and revolving debt. And so installment debt would be something like a car payment where you have a maximum amount that you borrow, and every payment you make, it goes downward. And then revolving debt is something where you can borrow, make a payment, and borrow again. And that's the type of debt where people mostly get in trouble, whether it's secured or unsecured.
I was just going to ask, like there are so many different subcategories. Which one is the most potentially harmful? I mean, no debt is really good. To me, it seems like it's pretty easy to get into debt now. Why is it so seemingly easy?
I think it's really easy to get into debt because of how electronic spending works. We really are, we have our cards attached to everything. We're sold debt in terms of payment and not total cost of debt. And access to credit has been really, really easy for Canadians. We're getting in trouble with debt because it's so easy to get. We can get a credit card without even really proving our income. We can borrow and make multiple payments, buy now, pay later, on everything from furniture to a day timer. So those sorts of things that are sort of built into our shopping culture make it really easy for us to get in trouble.
Yeah, I see that all the time online. And, it's something that you think of as a convenience, but then it could be setting you back. So when is it time to, maybe call in help?
Yeah, sometimes we need to get help. And some of the signals for that are obvious and some are a little bit more insidious. So the obvious ones are things like you can't make a payment, or you're only making a minimum payment for a long period of time. But if we're finding that we're reaching for credit to pay for everyday expenses, or we're using one debt to pay another debt, that's when we really should be reaching out to an accredited professional, like an AFCC like me, who's an accredited financial counselor Canada, either independently or through a credit counseling agency, or a licensed insolvency trustee, or an LIT, through an insolvency agency, and they'll be able to help you figure out options for your debt and what a path forward might be. And it's really important to look for those marks, AFCC or LIT, to ensure you're talking to a trusted professional.
Everyone has some personal level of comfort with debt. There is help, though, also for along the way before, it becomes to insolvency as well.
Absolutely. Right before insolvency, you can still reach out to a credit counseling agency and get some support. You can reach out to an independent AFCC or money coach that would be able to help you get some budgeting. I know there are agencies that provide community programs to be able to learn how to budget, because that's most often what people are struggling with is, how do I manage? We have more ways to manage our money than ever before, and it's never been so complicated. And so it really is a time where looking out for people who can support you, but just making sure that they have some sort of training so that you're getting trusted advice.
That makes complete sense. Okay, so before I let you go, I imagine all of this has some kind of implication on our credit. What does that relationship kind of look like, on a topical level, I guess?
Yeah, debt and credit are two sides of the same coin. Credit is your access to borrowing, and debt is how much you owe. So they affect each other.
And the reason why, of course, I want to bring that up is because that's what we'll be talking about next month. So thank you so much for this, Lauren.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.